There's a moment in life that no one prepares you for. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel powerful or dramatic. It usually arrives quietly, when you're tired, when you're questioning yourself, when you're wondering if anything you've done so far has mattered at all. This is the space where most people give up. Not because they are weak, but because nothing around them has changed yet. The world still looks the same. The silence feels heavy, and doubt starts sounding like truth. But here's what no one tells you. Transformation doesn't begin with clarity. It begins with pressure, with confusion, with the uncomfortable feeling that something is ending, even though you can't see what's beginning. If you've been feeling that weight lately, this isn't random. Stay with this video till the end. Subscribe, like, and don't leave early, because what you're about to understand could reframe everything you're walking through right now. You feel it before you can explain it. A heaviness that doesn't come from failure, but from something quietly shifting inside you. You wake up tired even after rest. Familiar routines feel heavier than they used to. The life you've been living hasn't collapsed, but it no longer fits the way it once did. And that confusion scares you. You start questioning yourself. You wonder if you're losing direction, losing motivation, losing grip. You look around and nothing is visibly wrong, yet something feels deeply unsettled. That silent tension follows you through the day, sits with you at night, and whispers doubts you didn't ask for. You think something must be broken in you. You think this discomfort means you're falling behind. But listen carefully. This weight isn't here to crush you. It's here because something inside you is moving. Before any real change, there's always pressure. Not the loud kind that announces itself, but the quiet kind that stretches you from the inside. The kind that makes your old ways feel uncomfortable, not because they failed, but because they've done their job. You are standing at the edge of an internal shift, and your nervous system doesn't know how to label it yet. So it calls it anxiety, confusion, restlessness. This is the moment most people misread. They run from this feeling. They numb it. They distract themselves. They rush back to old patterns because at least those patterns feel familiar. But what you're experiencing right now isn't a warning sign. It's a transition. Discomfort is not always the enemy. Sometimes it's the evidence that you're no longer asleep in your own life. You're not stuck. You're being reconfigured. That heaviness you feel is a tension between who you've been and who you can no longer remain. It's the internal friction of growth before clarity arrives. Life doesn't always give you answers first. Sometimes it gives you pressure and asks whether you'll stay present long enough to understand what it's shaping. You wake up and everything still looks the same. Same room, same problems, same unfinished conversations sitting in the back of your mind. And the most exhausting part isn't the struggle itself. It's a question that keeps repeating in your head. Why doesn't anything look different yet? You've been trying. Quietly. Consistently. You've carried the weight. Made the adjustments. Stayed awake when it would have been easy to shut down. And yet, when you look around, there's no visible proof that it's working. No moment you can point to and say, this is it. So doubt creeps in. Not loudly, but persistently. It tells you maybe your effort isn't enough. Maybe you waited too long. Maybe this is all just motion without movement. But you don't realize how much of your energy is being spent underground right now. You're building things that don't announce themselves. Emotional stability, mental endurance, a stronger sense of self that doesn't collapse every time life pushes back. Those things don't show up on the surface. They don't earn recognition, but they decide whether you last when change finally arrives. Right now, it feels like stagnation, like you're stuck in a holding pattern while everyone else moves forward. But what if this pause isn't empty? What if it's structural? What if this is a phase where your internal foundation is being reinforced so you don't break under the weight of what you're asking for? Growth doesn't always feel like progress. Sometimes it feels like repetition, like patience stretched thin, like doing the right things with no immediate return. And that's exactly why so many people quit here, because they confuse visibility with validity. They assume that if something hasn't shown itself yet, it must not be happening. You don't just feel tired in your body. You feel tired in who you are. A deep exhaustion that sleep doesn't touch, because it's not coming from effort alone. It's coming from carrying a version of yourself that no longer fits. And that weight is confusing, because you can't point to one clear reason for it. You start doubting yourself in quiet ways. Not dramatic breakdowns, but subtle questions that follow you everywhere. Why does everything feel heavier than it used to? Why do simple things drain you? Why do you feel disconnected from parts of your life that once felt natural? You assume something is wrong with you. You assume you're becoming weaker, less capable, less motivated. But that assumption is a mistake most people make. This kind of emotional heaviness doesn't show up when you're failing. It shows up when something inside you is loosening its grip. When an old identity, one you relied on for years, is starting to crack. Not because it was bad, but because it's no longer enough to hold who you're becoming. You've spent so long being a certain version of yourself. The one who survives. The one who pushes through. The one who adapts, tolerates, and keeps going even when it hurts. That identity kept you safe. It got you through things you didn't think you'd survive. But now, it's costing you more energy than it gives back. So your system starts resisting it. You feel emotionally heavy because you're tired of holding yourself together in ways that no longer feel honest. You're tired of performing strength when what you really need is alignment. You're tired of being the person you had to be, instead of the person you're ready to become. And that internal conflict is exhausting. What unsettles you most right now isn't the pain itself. It's the fact that the things that used to protect you don't work anymore. The habits you relied on, the mindsets that helped you survive, the ways you distracted yourself, pushed through, or shut things down just enough to keep moving. They are losing their grip, and that feels terrifying. You try to go back to them out of instinct. You repeat the same internal talk, the same routines, the same emotional shortcuts. But this time, they don't give relief. They don't calm you. They don't bring certainty. And instead of feeling safe, you feel exposed, like something has been taken away without warning. Your old patterns are losing power because they've taken you as far as they can. They were never meant to be permanent. They were scaffolding, survival tools, temporary structures built for a version of your life that required endurance more than presence. And now, those structures are being removed, not to leave you helpless, but to make space for something more honest. This is a phase where uncertainty shows up uninvited, where your usual ways of coping stop numbing the discomfort, where you can't outrun your own awareness anymore. And that's when most people rush to escape. They fill the silence. They chase noise. They cling harder to what's familiar, even when it's empty. But this moment isn't asking you to escape. It's asking you to stay. Stay with a discomfort that no longer has easy answers. Stay with a space that's uncomfortable because it's preparing you. Let the old ways fall apart. You feel split in a way you can't explain. Part of you wants to move forward, to step into something new, something more honest. And another part of you keeps pulling back, tightening its grip on what's familiar. It feels like standing in the middle of a door that won't fully close and won't fully open. And that tension is exhausting. You tell yourself you should be clearer by now, more decisive, more confident. But instead, every choice feels heavy. Every step forward feels like betrayal of who you used to be, and every step backward feels like betrayal of who you're becoming. So you stay stuck in between, blaming yourself for not choosing faster. This inner conflict isn't weakness. It's transition. You're being pulled in two directions because two versions of your life are trying to coexist in the same space. The old one knows how to survive. It knows the rules, the limits, the emotional shortcuts. It's familiar, predictable, and safe in ways that don't excite you anymore. The new one doesn't have a clear shape yet. It only shows up as a feeling, restlessness, longing, dissatisfaction with what used to be enough. Resistance is what makes this painful. You resist a pull forward because it feels uncertain. You resist a pull backward because it feels suffocating. And in that resistance, you exhaust yourself trying to force clarity. But clarity doesn't come from force. It comes from acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean rushing the change. It means admitting the truth. You are no longer who you were, and you are not yet who you're becoming. And that middle space, uncomfortable as it is real, necessary, temporary. There's a quiet kind of loneliness that hurts more than being alone in a room. It's when you're surrounded by people, noise, conversations, and still feel unseen, still feel separate, still feel like something inside you has stepped back from the world, even though your body is still present in it. That kind of isolation doesn't announce itself. It just settles in. At first, you fight it. You wonder what you did wrong. You replay conversations, question relationships, blame yourself for drifting. You assume this distance means you're being punished, forgotten, or left behind. And the longer it lasts, the more personal it feels. Like life has pulled you aside and said, you don't belong where you used to. But that's not what's happening. This isolation didn't arrive to break you. It arrived to separate you from noise, from influence, from versions of yourself that were built to survive other people's expectations. You're alone right now because something in you needs space to breathe. For a long time, your identity was shaped by reaction, by roles you played, by adapting to what others needed, wanted, or expected from you. You stayed connected by being useful, agreeable, available. And slowly, without noticing, you lost track of your own inner voice. Not because you were weak, but because you were busy surviving connection. Isolation interrupts that pattern. When the distractions fall away, when the constant validation disappears, when there's no one to perform for, something uncomfortable happens. You start hearing yourself again. Your real thoughts, your buried exhaustion, your unspoken desires. And at first, that clarity feels like pain, because it exposes how long you've been ignoring parts of yourself just to belong. This is a refining space. You reach a point where pushing harder doesn't make you stronger. It just makes you tired. Not the honest kind of tired that comes from effort, but the hollow kind that comes from forcing yourself to move in a direction your whole system is resisting. You wake up already tense, already bracing, already preparing to fight the day. And somewhere inside, you know this can't be how it's supposed to feel. You've been trying to control everything. The timing, the outcomes, the way things should unfold. You've been gripping your life tightly, afraid that if you loosen your hold even a little, everything will fall apart. So you force discipline when what you need is clarity. You force motivation when what you need is rest. You force answers when what you need is patience. And the more you force, the more disconnected you feel. That's when exhaustion turns into frustration. You start asking why nothing flows anymore, why even your best efforts feel heavy, why progress feels strained instead of grounded. You blame yourself for not being strong enough, focused enough, relentless enough. But the truth is simpler and harder to accept. You're not failing because you're weak. You're struggling because you're forcing a life that's no longer aligned. Surrender doesn't arrive as peace at first. It arrives as resistance breaking down. As the moment you realize you can't muscle your way through this phase. It feels like standing still when every instinct tells you to push. It feels dangerous because control has been your survival strategy for so long. But surrender is not quitting. It's releasing the illusion that control is the same thing as strength. Alignment begins quietly. It starts the moment you stop trying to overpower what feels wrong and start listening to what feels true. You stop asking how to make things work and start asking whether they're meant to. You stop forcing yourself to fit into timelines, expectations, and identities that drain you. When you release control, you begin noticing signals you were too tense to hear before. Your intuition gets louder. Your body responds differently. Decisions feel less frantic and more grounded. You start moving with life instead of against it. And that movement, while slower at first, feels steadier. You become more effective not because you're trying harder, but because you're no longer fighting yourself. You're starting to notice small changes that don't have names yet. Not breakthroughs, not answers, just quiet shift in how you respond, how you think, how certain things no longer pull at you the way they used to. And part of you wants to rush this, to grab those signs and demand more from them. To ask, is this it? Is this finally happening? That urgency comes from how long you've been waiting. You've spent so much time in struggle, so much time in uncertainty, that the moment things begin to soften, even slightly, you want guarantees. You want proof that the pain meant something. You want the outcome now, not later. And without realizing it, you start leaning too far into the future, measuring every small change against what you hope will come next. The signs you're looking for aren't dramatic. They are subtle. They show up as pauses instead of reactions, as moments where you don't explain yourself, as a strange calm where anxiety used to live, as a growing intolerance for what once drained you. These are not finishes. They are alignments. And alignment doesn't rush. You're learning how to observe yourself without trying to manage the outcome. You're learning how to notice growth without exploiting it for reassurance. That's maturity. That's trust forming, not in a result, but in a process. Presence roots you where you are. Anticipation pulls you forward. One day, the outcome will show itself. Not because you rushed toward it, but because you were ready to receive it without losing yourself. Nothing is missing. Nothing needs to be forced. What's changing inside you doesn't need speed. It needs space. You're not waiting for your life to begin. It's already unfolding, right here, in the stillness you finally allowed yourself to stand inside.